the Rad. Thank you. So you all, I'm Bess Yates. I am one of the members of the Radnor Environmental Advisory Council. And so we're really excited to have Phil Forsyth here tonight just to talk with us about his work since 2008-ish, 2007 and 8, with the Philadelphia Orchard Project. If you all aren't familiar with the Philadelphia Orchard Project, he's going to tell us all about it, and then just how they have been partnering with community groups across Philadelphia to plant edible landscapes. So not just orchards, but we'll see that there's a whole range of plants that they've been planting that are edible in a whole range of different types of spaces. So I'm going to turn it over to Phil. Really appreciate you coming to talk with us out in the suburbs and just helping us to understand a little bit more about how we could out here in Radnor and in Delaware County, Chester County, maybe we have a few Chester County residents, just work with our landscapes and plant something that might be a little bit more productive. So I'm going to hand it over to you and I'm going to mute myself. But you all, before we start though, I do want to make sure that everybody who has come in a little bit later, we're using the chat box. So you can open up the chat box in Zoom and type questions in. I will be monitoring that chat box, and then towards the end of the talk, we will go through with a question and answer session. Okay. So, all right, Phil, thanks so much. Take it away.
Thanks, Bess. Thanks for having me here. Glad to talk to you about our work. I am a co-executive director of the Philadelphia Orchard Project. We're a nonprofit that plants and supports community orchards in the city. And I've been involved since its founding back in 2007. So our agenda for the next hour is I'm going to give you a sort of a short introduction to POP, as we call it, the Philadelphia Orchard Project, in our work, give you a little tour of some of our orchard sites, and talk about our other programs and initiatives. And then we're going to talk a little bit more about the stuff you might use in Radnor, orchard plant selection, what you might want to plant in your yard or community. And we'll talk a little bit about food forests and companion plantings. So going beyond just the food producing plants to other things that are involved in these landscapes. And then a bit about fall maintenance. And as Beth said, we're going to save some time at the end for question and answer. So put your questions in the chat box and we'll address them at the end of the presentation. So just a bit of the history of the organization. So POP was founded in 2007 by Paul Glover, who had a vision to essentially use the uh, incredible amount of underutilized green space in the city to grow food for those in need. Specifically, sort of what was different was focusing on perennial crops. So fruit and nut trees, berry bushes, fruiting vines, um, perennial flowers and herbs as well. And so the vision was to address two problems simultaneously. Philadelphia being, well, actually, I just read an update. I've been saying for 18 years that Philadelphia is the poorest major city in the United States of the top 10 in population. We were just passed by Houston. I don't know if that's something to celebrate or not, but we are now the ninth out of 10 biggest cities in the country in terms of poverty rate, with about 20% of Philadelphia's population below the poverty line, and a huge amount of challenging access to fresh foods, accompanying diet-related disease and other impacts that correlate pretty closely with that poverty. At the same time, we have a tremendous amount of green space, 40,000 vacant lots in Philadelphia, as well as over 10,000 acres of public parkland. So a lot of underutilized green spaces in many cases that could be put to use in to feed those in need. So we've stayed true to that original vision. Our vision statement now is, in partnership with communities, we envision urban ecosystems that create beautiful green space, connect neighbors, provide hands-on learning experiences, and grow fresh food for generations to come. And so I'm going to walk you through why we do the work we do. Why are urban orchards a good idea? Um, and the most obvious, of course, is the fresh fruit. So over the last 18 years, we've now worked with community groups to plant. We've designed and planted 56 orchards in Philadelphia and currently support 70, soon to be 71 orchards in the city, primarily in under-resourced neighborhoods, but all over the city. These sites include over 1,600 fruit and nut trees, over 4,000 berries and fruiting vines, and over 28,000 herbaceous perennials, which I'll talk a bit about more later. Um, Last year, over 7,000 people in the city tasted something grown in a pop orchard, and our partners reported over 8,600 pounds of total harvest last year. And our partners always tell us about the transformative experience of people picking, eating fresh fruit directly from a tree or bush for the first time. And it's really a gateway to fresh eating. For many of our urban farm partners, they say, yeah, the sweetness of the fruit brings people in. They try that, they're more likely to come back and try that bunch of kale the next time they visit. Um, Even before fruit trees come into production, which can take 5 to 10 years for some fruit, they are wonderful places to build community. Um, and last year, our partners reported over 8,300 people used our orchards as community gathering space. Um, and we operate on a community partnership model. So every orchard we plant is in partnership with a community group, um, schools, houses of worship, community gardens, urban farms, wide range of nonprofits, low-income housing, all kinds of different groups across the city. So we essentially provide support in helping to design the orchard, sourcing the plant materials, organizing the planting day, and then long-term ongoing support in training our partners and supporting them in care of the orchards. But our community partners own these spaces. They do the day-to-day watering, weeding, harvesting, and distributing of the produce in a manner that they determine within their community. Um, Ecological impact is another thing we talk about, a wide range of environmental benefits, including a double carbon offset. We just actually finished a research study with UPenn looking at the carbon impacts of urban orchards. But in short, fruit trees, like any other trees, absorb atmospheric carbon and help clean the air. At the same time, all the food we produce in the city is food that doesn't have to be produced elsewhere at tremendous environmental costs in terms of industrial ag practices, and then long-term shipping, refrigeration, et cetera. You may have heard that the average produce in the United States travels over 2,000 miles from where it is grown to where it's consumed. That has huge carbon impacts, whereas the fruit we grow in these orchards usually goes no further than from picking directly to mouth or maybe distributed directly to a neighbor within 24 hours. So we're cutting out all of those carbon impacts. Other things you can look at, stormwater runoff, reducing that, providing shade for neighborhood cooling, and restoring neighborhood ecologies. And I'll talk more about the companion plantings, but helping to bring living ecologies back to neighborhoods throughout the city. And we can also look at the healing power of plants. So these are important spaces in multiple ways. But nature deficit disorder is a real thing. And we like to think that these spaces in some small way address that challenge. Economic impacts, we are not planting commercial orchards. In fact, we specifically don't partner with businesses or individuals, only community groups. But some of our urban farm partners do sell some of what they grow as part of generally youth-based agricultural entrepreneurship programs, where mostly high school students are learning not only how to grow, but getting experience with selling what they grow, making value-added products, things like that. So sort of a micro enterprise. Educational value, I often say this is the most important thing we do, which is reconnect city residents with nature and with the food system right in their own neighborhoods. And Yeah, we teach all kinds of workshops. I'll talk more about our programs in a bit. But last year, over 4,000 um, people, mostly or about half youth, participating in educational opportunities at pop orchard sites. Um, let's see. And the last one I'd like to talk about is permanence. So cities have often regarded urban agriculture as a temporary land use until something else can be built to generate more tax revenue. But we like to make the argument that based on all these wide-ranging benefits, that urban orchards should not only be accepted, but promoted and celebrated as permanent parts of city infrastructure. And of course, fruit trees can live for decades, sometimes centuries. They have a lot greater sense of permanence than do vegetable production. Um, so that's a brief look at why we do what we do. Here's a map. This one's actually a couple years out of date at this point. I should update this, but you can see 70 currently orchard sites across the city. Green ones representing ones we designed and planted. Yellow ones are other sites that we've taken on in support of. Um, so throughout the city, but primarily lower resource neighborhoods in West and North Philadelphia. So I'm going to take you on a little tour of just a few of our partner sites. Bartram's Garden. If you've never been there, highly recommend it. This is the oldest, considered the oldest botanic garden in North America, former home of John Bartram, and one of the larger orchard sites we have with over 140 fruit and nut trees currently. Um, and we're in partnership with a wonderful urban farm program called Sankofa Community Farm, really focused on serving that neighborhood of West Philadelphia. Um, Mill Creek Urban Farm. Actually, I'll go back and say this is one of the sites where we have monthly orchard work days that we work with Sankofa to maintain the space and where we invite public volunteers. So if you are interested, this is one site you could come check out, lend a hand, and learn more about it. Mill Creek Urban Farm, one of our other urban farm partner sites, also in West Philly. This is one of the older urban farms currently in the city. We could talk more about what defines an urban farm versus a community garden. Obviously, there's many gardens that are way older than that. But this was founded in 2005. And that Alkebulan is in the background there, is one of his pop staff, but he used to also run Mill Creek Urban Farm. Lee Elementary is one of, I think we're up to 13 school sites in Philadelphia. And this is an example of a site. Many Philadelphia schools, unfortunately, are surrounded by seas of pavement because it was considered easier to maintain. So we've been involved in projects at several schools to depave part of the schoolyards and plant rain gardens and also orchard plantings. Union Baptist, one of the houses of worship we partner with. This is a historic Black church in South Philadelphia. Was the congregation of Marian Anderson, among other people. But we've partnered with the neighbors there to transform a lot that the church owns right next to it into a food forest, which I'll talk a little bit more about later. Another sort of prominent public horticulture site in Philadelphia, the Fairmount Park Horticulture Center, is an example of one of our food forests. And you can see in the photo some of the diversity of the plantings, not just fruit trees, but a wide range of other plants. And these are our most recent partners, actually, the two new sites we planted last year, Community Garden at the Creek and Sanctuary Farm. Community Garden at the Creek is in West Philly, Sanctuary Farm in North Philly. Um, and they both sites actually were focused on raised bed gardens, so berry gardens primarily. And then this spring, our newest site is Penn Treaty Park, where we planted an all-native food forest. I don't have a photo of that one yet, but we'll be planting again there later this fall. And then just want to talk a little bit about our headquarters site, the Pop Learning Orchard, we call it, which is at the Woodlands, which is a historic garden cemetery in West Philadelphia. And so this is the one site that we directly maintain ourselves, as in Pop staff, rather than in partnership with a community group. And it's a demonstration orchard intended as an educational hub for our partners, both current and prospective, to come and check out what the possibilities are, learn how to grow. It's also a place for our staff to expand their orchard knowledge and capacity. So we help most of our partners on a quarterly basis, once per season. A few sites we do on a monthly basis, but some of the more complicated strategies of orchard care require a lot more consistent attention than that. So this is a place for us to apply that knowledge and be able to then share it with our partners. We also have public work days twice a month here. So if you want to come check that out. We also have a monthly open orchard Saturday that you can take a tour. This is actually showing the very early days of the orchard, but we did something called alley cropping here in the early years where we were growing annual crops in between the very young fruit trees. And then over time, we're converting those rows into food forests, like you see on the right, with all kinds of companion plantings. Here you can see a harvest from this spring of all kinds of berries. And in addition to we donate everything we grow here to Emergency Food Services, Food Not Bombs, and other organizations in West Philly. Sometimes we also donate bouquets of flowers and herbs. This is also the site where we have our nursery, where we grow out all our plant materials that again get planted across the city with our partners. In the spring, we always have a plant sale to sell some of extra material beyond what we need for our partner sites. And we have a wide range of, edible plant materials that I'll be talking more about in a bit if you're interested in sourcing from us. We also, 2 years ago, built a set of high tunnels. High tunnels is a term for an unheated greenhouse, so just using the sun's energy to heat it. One is for winter storage of nursery plants. The one you're seeing here is where we're experimenting with Zone 8 crops. So Philadelphia is now officially Zone 7B. And we are anticipating in the next 10 years that we will be Zone 8 as the climate continues to change. So we're learning how to grow these plants in preparation for that ongoing change. So yeah, in the foreground, you see we're actually trying to grow fruiting bananas in the city without any supplemental heat. We'll let you know how that works. It did survive the first winter, hasn't fruited yet. But we have I've got a list actually. We've got hardy citrus like kumquat, yuzu, citronella, loquat, pomegranate, olive, pineapple, guava growing in there, as well as herbaceous plants like ginger, turmeric, grass, and some more standard things we plant outdoors that we're growing in a high tunnel to get different seasons of production. Our sort of core workshop series is called Popcore. This is a 4-part series that we teach the basics of orchard care, from pruning to pest and disease management, to harvest and use of orchard plants, to orchard design. And this year we've done this series exclusively for our partners and our lead orchard volunteers. But we'll probably be phasing back in some public offerings of this. They're also available on our YouTube channel. Pop Harvest and Pop Harvest Ed. Pop Harvest is our gleaning program. So once or sometimes twice a month, we'll go out to different neighborhoods and harvest abundant but otherwise often overlooked city fruits, like Juneberries, mulberries, crab apples, ginkgo nuts, hawthorns that are all around us, but we usually walk by without thinking about their edible value. And then the Pop Harvest Ed series is focused on bringing in community educators, usually from our partners, to teach about the edible and medicinal value of some of the lesser known plants in our orchards. We also do harvest festivals. We're just about to kick off fall harvest festival season. So actually this Saturday is the 16th annual Apple Festival in East Fairmount Park. It's now also Pawpaw Palooza, celebrating the pawpaw fruit. So you can come check that out. We do cider pressing at all these events. There's going to be one at Bartram's and one at Aubrey Arboretum in October, if you want to check it out. So now I'm going to move on to what might be more directly applicable to you and Radnor in terms of what you can plant in your yard. And we've learned a lot over the last 18 years about what grows well here. And it's an interesting place to grow fruit. Zone 7 is sort of in a sweet spot where we can grow all of the sort of traditional northern fruits, apples, pears, peaches, grapes, whatever, that we're all familiar with. Also, we can grow Mediterranean fruits like figs and pomegranates. Um, and so there's some interesting different mix of plants we can grow here. The other big factor with our climate is high humidity. Now, unfortunately, this means it is extremely challenging to grow some of the most common fruits, like apples and peaches, because they get so many disease and pest issues in this climate. Um, so I'll talk a lot more about that in a little bit. But so the common fruits are, familiar and delicious, but tend to be more challenging to grow. So you really want to focus on cultivar selection for disease resistance if you are planning to plant apples, pears, Asian pears, your pome fruits, or your stone fruits, peaches, plums, cherries, and apricots. The more uncommon fruits, we really are big fans of them because they're interesting and equally delicious, but way easier to grow. So if your idea is to go out, plant something in your yard, keep it watered, and then just come back year after year and pick the fruit, then you probably want to go with the uncommon fruits. Like the big three for us are figs, persimmons, pawpaws, but there's many others which I'll talk about here. So most challenging fruits to grow, in our experience, many pest and disease issues. Unfortunately, two of the most popular fruits, apples and peaches, uh, quince is also another apple relative. Table and wine grapes can be pretty challenging as well. More moderately challenging fruits, all of your other common fruits fit in that category. The two easiest of the common fruits are pie or sour cherries, and Asian pears have had the least challenges in growing. European pears close behind that. June berries is actually also called a service berry. This is a native fruit. Just want to show being native doesn't necessarily mean it has no pest or disease issues. And June berries are actually related to apples and pears and get some of the same diseases. Plums, sweet cherries, apricots, crab apples. Most nuts, at least in the city, quite challenging to beat the squirrels to them. For that reason, we do like chestnuts, which have a sort of a spiky outer covering, less likely to be eaten by squirrels. In terms of berries and vines, native grapes a little easier to grow. Blackberries, raspberries, gooseberries, strawberries, honeyberries, um, are all, they've had some challenges, but generally relatively easy. And this is our list of ones that have very few pest or disease issues. Like I said, the big three for us, persimmons, figs, pawpaws, but also mulberries, jujubes, pomegranates, cornelian cherries, some very uncommon ones like ché fruit, medlars, trifoliate orange is actually a hardy citrus, even grows outside here. And chestnuts are our favorite of the nut trees. And then easier berries and vines, goumis, currants, jostaberries, elders, aronia, also known as chokeberry, Nanking cherries, hardy kiwis, maypops, and hops. And again, I talked a little bit nut trees. You do need a larger space for many nut trees, but there are some smaller options. We've been growing hardy almonds, which are a cross between a peach and an almond, and have done well here. Hazels and filberts, chinkapins are a shrub form of chestnut. And then there's a variety of much larger trees like chestnuts, pecans, hickories, walnuts, heartnuts. And again, watch out for squirrels. If you have a shady space, there are still some things you can grow. Um, but it is true, the more sun, the more fruit. So pawpaws are naturally an understory tree. They like a little shade, but they will produce a lot more fruit in full sun than they will in shade. June berries, sour cherries, medlars, mulberries, currants. Currants are probably the most shade tolerant of all fruit. Um, Gooseberries, goumis, trifoliate oranges, and for deep shade, you can grow mushrooms and some other edible herbaceous plants. But um, we get a lot of questions about street trees, especially in the city, growing fruit there. We don't recommend larger fruited trees, especially in the city. You don't want larger fruit falling onto people's cars or making a mess on the sidewalk. So these are some of the smaller fruited trees we do recommend um, for planting on the street. Um, And I'm not going to get too technical here, hopefully, but just wanted to give you some heads up about understanding pollination before you decide what to plant in your yard. So there are different categories. Some fruit are self-fertile, meaning you only need one of that plant in order to produce fruit. So you'll see some on here and some that are labeled some plums, some sweet cherries. That's become because there are exceptions. So you do need to do some research. Uh, then there are plants that are partially self-fertile, which means they will produce some planted by themselves, but if you have another variety of that fruit nearby, then each plant will produce more fruit. It benefits from what we call cross-pollination, which is the next category, where you actually need two different varieties planted nearby, and you generally need an insect to fly from one to the other to spread that pollen. So it basically needs different genetics to successfully pollinate and therefore produce fruit. So planted by themselves, an apple with no other apples anywhere nearby will not produce any fruit. It needs cross-pollination. So here's a list of those. And then there are a few plants where they're actually separate male and female plants. A lot of people misunderstand that. They think cross-pollination means a separate male and female plant. Most plants, at least fruiting plants, their flowers have both male and female parts. But there are a few where there's separate plants with those types of flowers. Most kiwi vines, most American persimmons, and some mulberries, you actually need a male plant that will never produce fruit to pollinate your female plant and that for that to bear any fruit. A female plant with no male nearby will not produce fruit. And then the last thing to mention, not all cultivars are always compatible, so it gets more complicated. If you're planting apples, for example, you should consult a pollination chart like this to make sure your fruit is compatible. And basically, there's some very early flowering apples that their bloom doesn't line up with very late blooming apples, so they won't be compatible. And then there's a few exceptions. There are some apples, for example, with sterile pollen, like the Gravenstein and the Mutsu, that will never pollinate any other tree. They need another tree to pollinate them, but they won't pollinate anything else. So you just want to make sure before you decide what you're planting that you understand pollination. All right, I hope that wasn't too technical. Next, I'm going to get into food forests and companion plantings. So a food forest or edible forest garden, this is terminology that came out of the permaculture design movement. But I always like to remind everyone that indigenous groups throughout the world have grown in very similar ways for thousands of years. This is essentially the origins of agriculture, is doing it in an ecological way, and this is common to every civilization throughout the world. So it is, although we get some of the words and terminology from permaculture, it did not originate with permaculture. And in this region, the Lenni Lenape would have cultivated much of the landscape in a food forest style. So a food forest is designed to mimic a natural ecology, like a forest or a savanna or different ecology, but the human designers are choosing plants intentionally for a variety of purposes to maximize and diversify yields and for a variety of functions, not only producing food, but also medicine, plants for soil building, pest control, providing habitat for beneficial insects. And I'll talk more about that in a bit. But you can also look at other functions like beauty or providing, wood for building, etc. A lot of different things can be thought about in designing your food forest space. And we can identify 7 different layers in a food forest. So the canopy or your taller fruit and nut trees, sometimes nitrogen fixing trees. Subcanopy, most of your dwarf and semi-dwarf fruit trees would fit in that category. Your shrub layer, these are your berry bushes and other shrubby plants. Herbaceous layer, these are your taller growing herbaceous perennials. And then the soil cover or ground cover layer, low growing herbaceous plants. Below your feet, the rhizosphere or root layer, not to be ignored. You can have some edible root crops, edible mushrooms growing from that, but also really important ecologically with the relationships between trees and other plants and uh, fungi in the soil and other microorganisms in the soil. Really important to cultivate the soil to have a healthy orchard and food forest. And last, the climbing or vertical layer. These are your, fruiting vines. And this picture shows them climbing a tree, which of course is the natural habit of a vine. That's what it would do in a natural space. But we tend to think of this as using fences and arbors and other vertical structures. So just a few photos. One on the left is one of our school orchards and just showing that diversity of the understory plantings, the companion plantings. I'll talk more about those. And the one on the right is actually from the Central Rocky Mountain Permaculture Institute, where I got my training originally. It's about 20 years ago now. And yeah, so one of the things we're designing into our food forests are pollinator and insectary plants. So we're trying to attract beneficial insects, not only bees and other pollinators, but also parasitic and predatory insects that help to control pest populations. So our goal is not to eliminate all pests. It is to create an ecological balance. So if you do get pests coming into your food forest, you have a natural defense system of beneficial insects that and other companions, birds and things that can provide defense and reduce the need to spray or intervene in other more intensive ways. And yeah, a few of our favorite plants for attracting these beneficial insects, long blooming plants like catmint, anise hyssop, coneflowers, bee balm, tickseed. And fall blooming is really important. There's not many things that bloom into fall. Goldenrod and asters especially really cover the late months of fall. And then the umbel family is a really important one in terms of attracting some of those parasitic and predatory insects that control our pests. So fennel, lovage, dill, and other things in that family. And as with every part of the food forest, diversity is helpful. Um, so we want all different colors of flowers. We want different blooming styles, types of inflorescence. You can see the umbels here, but you really want to have a good variety, different bloom times, different colors, and different flower forms. And then we have soil building plants, the most important of which is probably nitrogen fixers. So this is a whole group of plants that actually, nitrogen being the number one nutrient needed for plant growth, is often the biggest component of fertilizers. These are plants that generate their own fertility for themselves and other plants around them. They pull nitrogen from the air and fix it into the soil in collaboration with certain soil-based bacteria. And there are all types of nitrogen fixers from trees like alder and black locust, shrubs, some of which are also food producing like gumi and seaberry, but many which are not, pea shrub, bayberry, New Jersey tea. And then there are herbaceous nitrogen fixers. So many of these plants are in the legume or pea family, but those range from trees to herbaceous plants. Some common perennial flowers, false indigo, Carolina lupin, other lupins, and then there are some native vines that are nitrogen fixing, groundnut is, um, and then some common cover crops, clover, vetch, alfalfa, as well as some common vegetables, beans, peas, also fix nitrogen. And then we have another category called dynamic accumulators or nutrient accumulators, living mulch. And there's been some suggestion that certain plants, as you can see in this sort of chart here, are better at pulling out certain nutrients. That needs more study. What we believe in anyway is that there are plants that are good generalists in pulling up a lot of nutrients. Ones like Russian comfrey that have very deep root systems and pull up a lot of nutrients into their big wide leaves. And then in the fall, those leaves die back to the ground, releasing those nutrients for other plants around them. Or they can be harvested multiple times a year and spread out as a nutrient-dense mulch or made into what we call a plant juice fertilizer, submerge them in water and make comfrey tea, not the kind you would drink, but to spread those nutrients onto other plants. Um, it's also a great plant for pollinator habitat, and bees love the flowers. It's also a very powerful medicinal plant, a healing herb. Its other name is knitbone. We also like aromatic companion plants, like strong-smelling herbs. And this is because most pest insects are looking for a very specific plant. And if you can sort of confuse them with these strong scents, it makes it a little more challenging for them. So mint family we love, as well as many uh, culinary herbs with strong scents. The onion family is another great family of plants we like to include in our orchards. And last, just to say, food forests, we're creating an ecology. These can also include, and probably should include, animals. Um, Bees are great companions for orchards and relatively easy livestock to maintain. We have beehives at our learning orchard. Uh, Both honeybees and native bees are both very useful, obviously, for pollination and can provide other benefits too. Poultry can be really good companions for a food forest, as well as some grazing animals. You do have to be thoughtful about how you're incorporating them, but poultry in particular can help eat pest insects, spread fertilizer, and provide another yield. All right. I don't know exactly how we're doing on time here, but I have one more section to get through, which is some tips for fall maintenance. And this could be for orchards, but a lot of it will be applicable to anyone's yard. Um, Fall is the best season for planting. A lot of people think of spring as planting season, but basically, most perennial plants, you're much better off planting in fall, season that extends from September through November. You actually often in our climate plant into December, um, as long as the ground hasn't frozen yet, you can plant. And the reason why this is a better season than spring for most plants is you get two seasons of cool weather for roots to get established before you face the summer heat. And this is true for trees, shrubs, vines, herbaceous perennials, and of course, bulbs are known for fall planting. There are a few exceptions. Evergreen plants planted in the fall, especially late fall, can struggle with drying out because they don't drop their leaves. Winter winds can dry out and kill the plants fairly easily. So spring might be a better season for them. There's some things you can do to help them if they're fall planted, but spring may be better for them as well as tender plants. We tend to plant our fig trees, for example, in the spring because the winter cold is more of a danger for them than the heat of summer. And then most annual crops you plant in the spring, but there are many fall crops you can do as well. Emergency pruning only. So there is a lot of confusion out there about what is the best time to prune uh, trees and other plants in your landscape. Fall is generally the worst time to prune, um, especially as you get later into fall. If you cut branches off your tree or plant, it's going to attempt to replace what you've removed, send out new growth, and it won't have time to harden off before the winter. So we really limit woody pruning to just the removal of very aggressive diseases like the black knot you see there, which affects plums and cherries, and fire blight on apples and pears we would remove in the fall. But otherwise, wait till the plant has gone dormant in winter. Um, and then same for herbaceous plants. Uh, Herbaceous means it dies back in the winter. Um, but it is actually ecologically much better to leave your dead flowers and leaves in the landscape until the spring. Um, a lot of the flower heads will feed birds over the winter. The leaves and stalks will provide habitat for um, beneficial insects over the winter time. So that's a best practice as well. Removing fallen fruit. So remove damage and drop throughout the fall season. This is called orchard sanitation. In a commercial orchard, they're really fastidious about removing any fallen fruit, any leaf that's fallen off the tree. because these can be vectors for disease and pests for the next season. Um, so you really want to take care of them. You can put them in hot compost, you can bury them, you can bag them up. I did want to note the photo on the right. That is of what we call a fruit mummy. So a healthy fruit will generally fall off the tree. There are some diseases that cause the fruit to stay on the tree over winter, and then they're in prime position to send out their spores and reinfect the fruit the next season. So it's really important to remove all those fruit mummies um, in the fall or through the winter before spring comes up again. Fall leaves are a tremendous resource. You can gather them. Again, in a commercial orchard, they're removing all fall leaves to try to get rid of that vector of disease. We gather them, we put them in our compost piles. We also use them, as you see in this photo, to create insulation for tender plants like fig trees. Um, Alternatively, rather than exporting all this valuable organic matter, and it used to drive me crazy when I did landscaping that we would export all the leaves in the fall and then come back in the spring and import all these wood chips. Or in a natural forest, the leaves fall from the trees and are the wood chips or the mulch for the trees. Anyway, an alternative is to, after the leaf drop, you can spread a thin layer of compost over the leaves or spray compost tea and help those leaves break down in place before the spring season comes. And last, fall harvesting. Of course, we often think of fall as harvest season, thinking of apples and pears, but there are a lot of other things to harvest throughout the fall. Pawpaws, and we're just finishing up that season here in September. Figs often go up through the beginning of October. Pears, apples, chestnuts, hazels, many other nuts in the fall, jujubes. There are varieties of raspberries and strawberries that produce in the fall. Grapes, hardy kiwis, maypops are all fall harvested. And going late into the season, even into November, sometimes December, we have persimmons, hawthorns, and medlars. So, last thing I wanted to share is how you can get involved. You can volunteer with us at Plantings and Workdays. Go to our website and sign up for our email list to get a heads up on these opportunities. You can visit us at the Pop Learning Orchard at the Woodlands. Again, sign up for our email list or check our event listing. The last Saturday of each month, we have an open orchard day where we give tours. If you want to learn more about orchard care, I really recommend joining our FOG Google group, which we share tips and reminders about orchard care and send out information about upcoming workshops and other opportunities to learn. We have a ton of information, 18 years worth of information on our website and our blog, and a lot of great video content, some of which is very highly produced and looks awesome on our YouTube channel, if that's your preferred way of learning. And then I'd be remiss if I didn't also encourage you to think about donating in support of our work if you're inspired by what you hear. This is the contact information, and then yeah, I'm ready for questions if you have some.
Great. Thank you, Phil. Yes, let's see. We have one question related to an umbellate flower. And so we were able to figure out the umbel is the flower type that resembles the umbrella, sort of like Queen Anne's
Right.
lace still. But then Samantha writes, why these umbellate flowers might attract insects more specifically that control other insect pests. Do you have a sense for that?
Yeah, one of the main things is that many of these predators and parasitic insects are very tiny, and they're looking for tiny clusters of flowers. So like the umbels are formed of many tiny little flowers. Asters are another good one for that reason. Um, but essentially, yeah, it's feeding that specific size of insect that's useful for us. So, for example, parasitic wasps, which are predators of many of our um, worst pests in the caterpillar family. Lacewings are another great one. These are all very tiny insects that like those little clusters of flowers.
Great. Okay. Thank you, Phil. And then Samantha also asks, do you have any sites that focus on native plants to Pennsylvania?
Yeah, most of our sites include some native plants, but obviously we're also, focused on feeding people culturally appropriate food. So we do plant non-natives in many sites. We do have a couple sites that are specifically focused on natives. One is our newly planted food forest at Penn Treaty Park, which is a really significant site for indigenous population here. And so we focus specifically on native plants for that reason. We also have a site at the Wissahickon Environmental Center that's a little older. What are we? Maybe 6 years old now of an all-native food forest there as well. And we see definitely increasing interest in native plants. Um, so yeah, that is definitely an interest and focus. But we're planting what our community partners are looking for. So um, it depends site to site what the plant list looks like.
Oh, um, okay. Well, and then you will make sure that if you do have questions, you can put them, we have a Q&A little button to press at the bottom panel of your Zoom screen. So you can ask any questions to Phil. And then I have a question whether of all the plants that you have been planting for the last 18 years, are there any that really provide like the biggest bang for your buck? Like I'm thinking like whether I'm thinking more vegetable plants, like the equivalent of maybe a tomato plant or
Right.
cabbage even though it's one, it really can go a long way.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I mentioned our big three, which is
Okay.
persimmons, pawpaws, and figs.
Okay.
We are uh, in the sort of later part of fig season now. We are currently at over 50 pounds per fig tree in the Learning Orchard, um, which is pretty amazing with still a couple weeks to go. Um, they're really easy to grow, really productive, really delicious. A lot of people haven't had a fresh fig before. It's quite a different experience than dried fig. Um, Pawpaws, most years in our partner survey, uh, they have been the number one producer by weight per tree. If you've never experienced a pawpaw, it is a wonderful native Pennsylvania fruit, native to most of the eastern U.S., the largest fruit native to North America, sometimes called the banana of the North. It's related to many tropical fruits like soursop and cherimoya. Um, and tastes a little bit like a banana, looks kind of like a mango. It's really a special plant. And it's also, for us, it connects to um, immigrant communities from other parts of the world who are familiar with its relatives from tropical parts of the world. This is a one northern relative of that family. And so it helps us to connect with, fruits that we can't grow here, but it's familiar enough that it works on that level. And then persimmons, I would always tell people, is literally the easiest of all the fruit trees to grow. Um, and yeah, it is. If you keep it watered the first year, you're going to be back year after year to harvest. It doesn't have any challenges with cold like figs do, and really no pest or diseases whatsoever, and just highly productive. So those are kind of the biggest three. I also really love Asian pears. If you're thinking about an apple, I'm going to tell you don't plant an apple. It's going to be a pain in the butt. You're going to have to learn how to spray all kinds of different things. Organic apple orchards do not mean no spray orchards. They're spraying just as much as chemical orchards. They're just spraying different things. In our humid climate, to get eating quality apples growing organically, even with a lot of spraying, is a difficult challenge. You can really aim for cider grade apples if you're trying to grow organic apples in this region. Um, anyway, Asian pears, similar enough to apples, way easier to grow and very productive. Um, yeah, I mean, I could go on. I have a lot of favorite fruits.
Mm. Mm. Thank you. Okay. Any other questions, you all, for Phil? Um, I want to make a plug. You can see in the backdrop, there's one of their work days. I have participated in a handful of the work days, uh, not as recently, but I want to say that they are very educational. So it's not only just getting out there and getting your hands dirty, but you learn a lot whether it's working to mulch, sheet mulch, or to, whether it's harvesting, or weeding. But it really is a great opportunity to kind of get sort of some hands-on knowledge of how to work with these edible landscapes. So I can't recommend Phil's group Pop enough. It's really just a really great experience. They're so organized and do a wonderful job of really working with their volunteers. So from all ages. And they have a great website too, which makes it really easy to sign up to volunteer.
And yeah, I'll just say I have a great team. I started with Pop in 2007 when it was an all volunteer organization, and I was the only staff for the first 8 years. We're now up to 11 staff of this as of this year, and 70 orchards. So pretty exciting to see how we've grown through the years. Is anyone in Radnor growing fruit already? I guess I'll ask a question.
Let's see.
Anyone on the call or know of any? Just curious.
Yeah, I don't see anyone responding in either way. I know that I live in Radnor and I don't see very many fruit trees. Oh, and Samantha, you say you have a pawpaw at the Willows. So at the Willows Community Garden? The chat is disabled. Okay, so we're in the Q&A box. I see what you mean. The chat box is disabled, but if you go to the okay, yes, at the Willows Community Garden. Great. So Samantha, there is a community garden that is actually really large. That's adjacent to this Willows sort of piece of property and park. Uh, And then Kim, you say you had a fig, but it died. I know that we also I gave a fig tree away, and it did not when planted, it did not produce any fruit. So I don't know whether it was where it was planted, but so
You probably do need to do more fig protection out where you are than in the city.
let's see,
We had the heat island effect, keeps it a little warmer for us.
right. Okay. Melanie, you have blueberries, but they disappeared before they could be picked. Oh,
Yeah, a number one
well,
target for birds.
right. Um, And okay, so phillyorchards.org. So Margaret is looking to open your website. Let's see if I can get that open. 'Cause Philly Orchards, I am not having a hard let's see. Try that one. Um, Oh, it looks like you were able to get it open. Okay. Any other questions, you all? Kim, let's see. My neighbor grew a fig tree, but she had to beat out the squirrels and birds for the figs. Yeah, I've heard of that too, about like peaches. Yes.
Yeah, squirrels can be a big challenge.
Yeah, interesting. Um, hmm, yeah. Well, I know that there is a good bit of land in Radnor Township that we could certainly, you know, grow more fruits and more edible plants. So something to consider. We will kind of keep this sort of as part of the ongoing conversation with the Radnor Environmental Advisory Council. Um, and just we'll keep you posted if things kind of progress to orchard status and so and would love to have you back again, Phil, to come check in with us again and every so often. So any other questions before we sign off for the evening? Oh, Melanie, you say you have a question. Any suggestions on how to protect trees from critters like
Hmm.
squirrel, deer? We have a good bit of deer out
Yeah. Um, yeah, we certainly deal with a lot of squirrels in the city. The number one factor is the distance between your fruit tree or nut tree and other bigger trees nearby. If you have a big space and can plant your trees more out in the center of a field where there's some open space around them, you'll have a lot less challenges with squirrels because they are afraid to run across those open spaces where can be targeted by hawks and other predators. So that's the biggest factor we've seen in how much squirrel predation there is. Uh, we've tried a lot of other things, not much works. This year we netted a whole large Asian pear tree, and that worked, but it is a big process to put a net around a tree. It's commonly done for blueberries to keep the birds away. So we have like a little structure around our blueberry garden that we put up nets in season. Um, but yeah, a lot of the other things people suggest, like um, putting hot pepper spray or things on things, it doesn't seem to actually discourage the squirrels. Deer, very difficult to grow fruit with deer present. Um, there are a few things they don't seem to bother, like pawpaws, for example. They will not eat pawpaw leaves. I haven't seen them bother fig trees either, although I feel like when deer get hungry enough, they will eat things not on their list. But I'm pretty sure they will never eat pawpaw plants or leaves. Um, so yeah, deer fencing is the primary way people exclude deer from their edible landscapes, which can be an expense, but worth it if you're actually trying to grow a lot of fruit.
there. That's a good idea. Okay.
Or
Well,
a dog that likes to chase squirrels and deer.
yeah, yeah, yeah. That's yeah. My dog would love to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, everybody. Um, Phil, if any anything parting words, I have one thought just related to the Environmental Advisory Council. We really do appreciate you coming, as I mentioned, and just if any of you all are interested in getting involved in the Environmental Advisory Council, we meet once a month. Tomorrow night is we'll be having a meeting. You can either come in person to the Radnor Township building over off of Ithan, and or we can, or actually, excuse me, it's Ivan Avenue. And then you can also join the meeting by Zoom. It goes from 6 to 7. And tomorrow night we'll be having a talk on seed collecting and seed sharing with the Radnor Memorial Library. So that's an exciting development that's happened over the last 6 months, developing this seed library. So please join us for any of the Radnor Environmental Advisory Council meetings. Share your thoughts, your feedback, your hopes, your dreams, and just we would love to keep making Radnor more environmentally oriented and productive. So, um, any last questions or thoughts for Phil or myself related to edible landscapes um, or the Environmental Advisory Council? We appreciate you all joining us tonight, and thank you again, Phil, and thank you, Ian, for helping to facilitate the Zooming. All right.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Phil.
Take care.
Okay, talk to you soon. Okay, great. Good night, everybody.